Alright guys, so today we're going to be looking at the build that I use on my Vex. Now this build does work amazingly well on bosses, but the difference is you can still take it out in Ultimate Vault Hunter 5 and do extremely well. Now this is the way I've been playing my Vex on stream, so I wanted to put it out there for the entire community to check out. One thing I will say is there will be balance patches in the future, so make sure you're checking the pinned comments on this video for any updates that I have. But having said all that guys, let's go ahead and hop into the video. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to be looking at is going to be the weapons for Vex. Now for this, I'm going with a very well-rounded approach. Our goal here is to ensure that Vex can be used in any type of content, from general ad clear all the way up to taking out the hardest bosses with minimal effort. So in order to do that, the first weapon we're going to look at is going to be our #1 weapon, and that is going to be an SMG. So I'm personally using Flutie here, but there are several kinetic SMGs that you can use. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which one you pick, as long as it's kinetic and it has a Jacob's part on it. We really like this because it's going to allow us to chain damage to nearby enemies, and that's going to make it much easier to clear ads in general content. Now for our #2 weapon, we're actually going to be using Chuck. Now the main reason I like Chuck and why I suggest you put it on this build is going to be for Vial bounties. Vials are very much a large part of the game, and it is going to be one of the best ways to get experience in endgame. And having a weapon that trivializes them is huge in this build. So in order to gain access to Chuck, you will need to be able to enter the Crawlcroft. The boss there is Fractus, and he is who drops this weapon. Now the other weapon I like to use for vials is Caisson. I think Caisson is a great weapon and works extremely well for your run-of-the-mill vials. The biggest issue with Caisson is it does not work that well on boss vials. The amount of damage it takes to break their crystals is just something that Caisson does not do very well. Transparently, I was using Caisson until I got my hands on Chuck. So having said all of that, if you do want to use Caisson, you will need access to the Origo Vault, as it does drop from that Primordial Guardian. At the end of the day, I advise you pick up Chuck over Caisson, that way you can take out boss vials, but do what works best for you and your playstyle. Now the third weapon I have on here is the Ballista, and I really like this weapon for long range shots. In this build, you're not going to spend a lot of time planting your feet, but occasionally there are enemies that you need to be able to reach out and touch, and this weapon does allow you to do that, and it synergizes with your build because it's a Jacob's weapon. Now in order to get this weapon, you will have to farm the Timekeeper, but the Timekeeper isn't really an issue with this build, and you don't need this weapon to farm the Timekeeper. So I'd actually prioritize picking up this weapon after we pick up the next weapon that we talk about, and that weapon is going to be the Hot Slugger. This weapon is an absolute beast, and once you know how to use it, it puts in some serious work. Outside of that, it is very, very easy to pick up. In order to pick up this weapon, you need to have access to Craven's Nook, and you need to farm Chad. And if you don't know who Chad is, it's the Callous Hairbringer of Annihilating Death. It is one of the 3 weapons that he can drop, and it is a weapon that a lot of people are utilizing in their build, and for very good reason. This weapon does very solid spike damage and has an insanely quick reload if you know how to reload it properly. This is going to be your boss killer when it comes to this build. Now this is one of those weapons that it helps to have it to farm it, but you probably will not have this weapon when it comes time for you to farm this weapon, and that is not actually a big deal. There are several really solid Jacobs shotguns that you can use in lieu of having this weapon right now. One of the ones I like is a Balor with a knife launcher. The knife launcher does a lot of spike damage and will typically take down most enemies in a single shot. And even if it doesn't, you can continue to follow up with additional shots until you finally get your bleed to proc. Once your bleed procs, most enemies will go down almost instantly. Now the next item for this kit I'm going to suggest you pick up is a Mega Triple Bypass with Amp on it. This works really well because it's a rep kit that gives you 3 charges, and that means it's super easy for you to spam farm bosses, as your rep kit is not really ever on cooldown. On top of that, it has a 30% chance to refill a charge when you get a kill anyway, which you're going to be doing on bosses. So you can pick up the Triple Bypass from Backhive, which is located right here in the Fade Fields. Now if you do not have the Triple Bypass right away, it's not a big deal. A lot of the order rep kits will drop with 2 charges. So look for an order rep kit with 2 charges on it that also has amp and preferably a very short cooldown. It's not going to be as good as a Triple Bypass, but it will hold you over until you get one. Now this is a bleed build, and bleed builds do work best with the throwing knife. I know a lot of people are tired of seeing builds with the throwing knife, but unfortunately until they nerf the throwing knife, it's going to be used in a lot of different builds. And the reason we like to use it is because it's going to make all of our damage be critical hits for the first 5 seconds. And that goes a very long way or proccing our bleeds and making sure our bleeds hit big damage numbers. This build will work just fine without the throwing knife. However, it will take you a little while to get your bleed to proc. So if you do not have a throwing knife with the penetrator augment, don't worry about it too much. Even a regular throwing knife with damage amp payload is a nice addition, as it's going to give you a 15% damage increase, which does help as well, and it is something that I used for a long time until I got my penetrator knife. Now when it comes to your class mod, I'm actually using an epic mod, and I like these because I can get them with bleed damage on them. As you can see here, this one has a +4 bleed damage. Now unfortunately, the stats that I got down bottom are not the best and are not the best synergies, but for me personally, I prioritized bleed damage. So mine has 35 critical hit damage, 45% assault rifle damage, and 25% ordnance cooldown rate. In an ideal world, I would want to get some critical hit rate on here and some kinetic damage. While the critical hit knife does give me unlimited critical hits for 5 seconds, it is only when I'm using the knife, and I would prefer to have increased critical hit rate all the time, so it would be nice to get it on my class mod. So for this build, I still do use the fireworks shield. Now, I have spent the better part of the last week farming every last legendary that is known to drop from a boss. As you can see from my bank, I do have quite a few, and unfortunately, I do have the bank bug that prevents it from showing every thumbnail. But you can see that I have spent some time to check out all of the different items. And while there are some shields that will provide you better or more benefits, the reason I still like the fireworks with this build in particular is just for the area clearing. The build we're going to use does not prioritize minions, and because of that, you and you alone are what is killing everything around you. And this is the build that I use in Ultimate Vault Hunter 5. So because of that, there are a lot of enemies and they hit very hard, and it is nice to be able to do whatever you can to take out every enemy on the screen, even the ones that you're not looking at. And the fireworks shield really helps you do that. So at this time, I would still actually suggest you put on a fireworks shield. And the last thing I have on is going to be a Jacob's enhancement. Now, I would like to try to get a legendary Jacob's enhancement and see how it works, but unfortunately I've not been able to get a Jacob's one to drop yet. So the one I'm using is the Leaper, and this gives me a 40% chance to ricochet non-critical hits, which we really like because it's going to make it that much easier for us to clear all of the ads on the screen. Now this one does have gun damage and gun critical hit damage, which I am happy with. That pistol fire rate doesn't do me any good because I don't actually use pistols. There are a couple different things I'd like to see in that slot, but it is really hard to get an ideal enhancement. So just roll through these and try to find what works best for you. Now for my firmware, I am using a 3-piece Deadeye, which gives me gun accuracy, gun critical hit damage, and every critical hit grants 15% critical hit damage per stack, for a maximum of 5 stacks for 10 seconds. So this really works well with a critical hit build, and we're going to be critting non-stop. And then I do have a 2-piece high caliber on here as well, and I like this just for the 10% gun damage and the 25% projectile speed. When it comes to Jacob weapons, they do not entirely feel hit scan. There seems to be a little bit of delay from when you pull the trigger and the travel time of the bullet. So this is going to help speed that up and make the build feel that much snappier. Now when it comes to this build, we're going to be using our green tree and we're going to be using our blue tree. I like to put 5 points on leeching attachment, 5 points on bloodletter, 5 points on material components, 5 points on gravesite, and I do like to put 4 points on target prescience. Now I really like the 4 points on target here because it gives the build even more forgivability. And when you mix this with our enhancement, it helps to ensure that when we're hip firing our SMG, even if we're not the most accurate, we are still getting those additional critical hits. And then over on our blue tree, we're going to put 5 points on cold iron, 5 points on portents of suffering, 3 points on fell inscriptions, and 3 points on grave quickening. And then the last thing we're going to do is put 5 points on prismatic ichor and 4 points on keen suffering. And then over in our vault hunter trait, we're going to set our primary to be incarnate, and we're going to set our augment to grave harvest. We like grave harvest because while we're in incarnate, this allows us to keep it up and running. And if you play this right, you'll be able to keep incarnate up the entire time the enemies are on the screen. Now, when it comes to your specialization, I have 60 points right now, but I'm going to tell you what to do if you have 50. If you have 50 points, I would put 10 in brute, 10 in sharpshooter, 20 in killer, and 10 in survivor. This is going to give you a little bit more survivability, and it's going to give you a bunch of additional damage. Now for your equipped skills, I would go ahead and run with overkill, which is going to cause enemies to explode when they die because of critical hit damage. Contamination, which is going to increase status effect application chances when you get critical hits, which is going to happen all the time. In the zone, and we really like this for when it comes time to take out big bosses like vault bosses or any other major boss in the game. And then finally, we're going to put on compounding affliction, which is going to have enemies take increasing damage for each status effect applied to them. So the first thing I want to look at is general mobbing. So during this part of your kit, there are actually two different ways we're going to play it. One is with and one is without our active skill. Now for the most part, these will play the exact same. However, when your active skill is up, you do need to prioritize pushing up 2 enemies that you've killed. The main reason for that is we want to ensure that our active skill stays up. And to do that, we need to collect the little orbs around the map. So when you kill an enemy, ensure that you're pushing up to try to grab the orbs that are floating in the air. Now, a few things I've noticed is that these do seem to be a little buggy. Running over top of them does not always instantly pick them up, and I do not know why this happens, but this can slow down your gameplay loop quite a bit. Just make sure that if you do try to pick one up and you run off, you look to see if the purple ring around you has disappeared. If it has not, go back and pick that orb back up. We're not going to utilize exploding these orbs as we're not really built into skill damage. We are primarily using them to ensure that we keep our active skill up. So while your active skill is up, just move around the map, hip fire, and ensure you're aiming for the enemy's heads. Our goal here is to get as many critical hits, and by extension, as many ricochets as we can. Mixing this with your fireworks will kill most of the enemies on the map. Now we do still have the critical hit knife, and I would use this on any of the tankier enemies that you see. You can swap out to your shotgun to help burn these out, but most of these enemies will go down quite quickly with just SMG shots as long as you hit them with the knife. And that is what you do when your active skill is alive. We really want to prioritize movement and move speed during this part of our build because we do not want to let our active skill run out. Now outside of our active skill, we will play very similar. The only thing here is that we do not feel pressed for time as we're not trying to keep our active skill up. So when this is happening, you can take a little bit more time, pull out your sniper, hit some of those long range shots if you so choose to, and you can really prioritize taking out any of the vile creatures you see on the map with your chuck. I really do enjoy this playstyle, and I enjoy this build because it allows me to prioritize still using guns, and that is one of my favorite ways to play a shooter. So now we're going to talk about how to use the bossing part of this kit, and it is quite simple. The first thing we're going to want to do is use our rep kit. Doing this will give us an additional 200% damage on the first shot that we shoot. You can do this at any point in time, but I would do it before you go in to start the fight. After you do that, jump in and summon the boss. Now remember, one of our specializations gives us bonus damage if we can aim down sights for 5 seconds. So when we're jumping down to fight the boss, we're going to go ahead and ADS the whole time. That way we build up our 5 stacks before the boss even shows up. Now when the boss shows up, we will go ahead and throw our throwing knife, but do that while you're still holding aiming down sights. If you do this properly, your knife throw will take you sub 1 second. And as long as it's sub 1 second, you will still keep the stacks on your ADS. Now I have tried using my rep kit while I was ADS, but unfortunately it will take too long and it will get rid of your buff. So that's why I suggest you use it early. Now after you do that, and after you hit the boss with your knife, just go ahead and aim for his weak spot and shoot your shot with your hot slugger. Your first shot should go ahead and start triggering the bleed, but if it does not, go ahead and follow up with as many shots as you want. I typically only shoot 1 shot, but you can shoot as many as you want. Another thing to note here is that you can do a sort of reload cancel with this weapon. If after you shoot your shot, you reload, it will reload your weapon instantly, and this will allow you to push out more shots than you typically could if you let the gun auto reload. And as you can see in the background, we take all these bosses out quite quickly. All right guys, and that's it. That's everything you need to know about the Vex build that I'm liking to use in Borderlands. Now, I am still really new to the Borderlands franchise. This is actually the first Borderlands game that I've ever played. And I can tell you that I've had a really good experience, and I love the power fantasy that some of these characters have. So this build does synergize around bleed and the knife, and both of these are very strong in their current meta and in their current sandbox. And we do expect them to get balanced at some point in the future, but fortunately, Borderlands team has said that they're not really concerned with nerfing things right now, they're more concerned with buffing up underperforming items. Now that doesn't mean that these things will not get balanced in the future, but for now you might as well use them and enjoy them. But if you did enjoy the content, consider liking and subscribing for more Borderlands content as well as other game coverage in the future. And I do stream 5 days a week, both here on YouTube and over on Twitch. So if you want to take some time to get to know me and the community, we'd be happy to get to know you. Having said all that guys, thanks for watching, and as always, Have a great day.